What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Corner Talks podcast. Today, I have a very special friend, a Spider-Man fanatic, actor, writer, director, Marc Anthony Sarria. What's going on?
What is up, man? I had to show up with the full-on costume, man. There's no way I'm talking about this and not showing you my diamond piercing nipples through this shirt.
Wait, that's a costume? I thought you were actually Spider-Man. What are you talking about?
You're absolutely right.
You're not from another multiverse? Come on. Anyone can
Spider-Man?
be Spider-Man.
You're absolutely
we're gonna
right.
We're gonna get into this movie, but that was one of the kind of like common themes in the movie, like the idea of the character, right? That anyone can take up that
The mantle.
heroic mantle and become this famous character that we all love and care about, right? So we're here for Spider-Man No Way Home. Marc Anthony Sarria and I did a podcast earlier about our predictions, and I would say quite frequently, more so on Marc Anthony Sarria's side, because he did quite extensive research before that podcast, predicted a lot of things that happen in the movie. So much so that, anyway, we're getting into spoiler territory, so I just should do a huge disclaimer before I discuss any further. Spoiler territory. If you're watching if you're listening to this, what's up?
It's a spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this, please keep an open mind that we will be discussing things that might piss you off if you didn't watch the movie yet. So having said that, this was everything I hoped it to be. I'm sure it was the same for you, Marc Anthony Sarria. You and I share our love for the character, our affinity for it. We've been advocates of the MCU. We've been advocates of what they could do with this character, and I'm just so happy that I've got a chance to witness this phenomenon, because everyone around the world is talking about this. And so I want to know from you, what was your initial reaction when you were watching this film after finishing it?
Oh man, well, it was the buildup, because living out of this city now, it's a little bit easier to get tickets, right, for like opening day things, for big things. I know a few of my friends that were in the city trying to get tickets in Toronto. Tickets went sold out like within hours of.
Bro, I was one of those guys, man. I went as a young in Dundas, and yeah, you're right. Like if you didn't get it within the hour, you were done.
It was crazy. Yeah. Seats were going as I was purchasing the ticket. So we ended up finding a spot out here. We watched it Thursday night, so the night before it dropped worldwide. Right. And that was necessary, man. I already had little bits of the movie spoiled for me before it even surfaced, or before it even got released worldwide. So it was to my own detriment and my own fiendish activity online that I did spoil a moment of this, but it was not anything that I didn't truly feel was going to happen anyway. So it was just like a little hint, but leaving it, man, it had me in awe, man. It was really just, they captured the energy of these characters and at the stages that they would be at now, right? Like it's and it's funny to see Toby and Andrew, their banter together, and they had a lot of scenes together, and I liked that they met first before all coming together. I think just the way that they executed that was different than I thought, but it was in the way that the storytelling unfolds in this movie, the way the characters are written, the way closure actually ends up coming through to like the likes of Andrew Garfield and his character that was cut off before his story was ended, right? There was little bits of each of the souls of each of the Spider-Man movies in there, and that's the nostalgia that just rips you apart, man. So I left, man. It met my expectations. It met the hype.
It met the hype for sure,
and the hype was ridiculously high.
The hype was ridiculously high. Some say, you've said it to me many times, that quite might become a reality, it beating Endgame. A lot of people are already discussing like this felt even more hype than Endgame, because from my knowledge, this has never been done before. Like bringing in characters that have played iconic superheroes from other actors and putting them into one movie, but also acknowledging it in a cohesive, plausible way, right? Because that's one thing
Exactly.
that we're forgetting is that it's not like they just showed up. There was the whole thing that they worked in with the Doctor Strange, and it's believable for me because I know that he um, dabbles with like magic and other dimensions and things like that. So it's possible to bring it in, bring these other characters. It was very exciting for me as well. The reaction in my theater, I don't know if it was the same for you. Like everyone was applauding and screaming at the screen and just reveling in the moment. These characters, I even proudly say like I got choked up seeing Toby because it reminded me when I was 8 years old, right? And I first saw like Spider-Man, and it brought me back like the feeling of those movies. But I think it was even more emotional for me because they stayed true to the promise. Well, they didn't really promise anything, but just the way the trailers and the marketing was done. And you and I both discussed this in the prediction video. You know, it was necessary. It was so imperative that they brought these characters back, not only for fan service, right, but to make for a cohesive story, right? In at the end of the day, like it would make sense if you're opening up the multiverse, you need to acknowledge that there's other people that played Spider-Man. Um, and it's crazy because like reflecting on the movie and before coming onto this podcast, I was thinking to myself, you know, other than the fact that again fan service and the hype and the vanity, like oh my god, like it's Spider-Man, whatever, like all the actors are there for the sake of tapping into our nostalgia. The reason why it worked again on multiple levels, but one of them being the whole essence of Spider-Man is that anyone can become a hero, right? And this was going back to like Spider-Man 2 when Aunt May says to him, I believe there's a hero in all of us, right? And I just love that revelation that Tom Holland's character had, right? And the other characters around him, that it's like there's no one Peter Parker, there's no one Spider-Man. There's nothing special about you. As harsh as that may sound, it's just the reality. There's nothing special about any of us, right? We're all unique in our own ways, but we can all become whatever we set our minds to. And it was just so touching to see like, all these characters that we grew up with, that we respect, that inspired us, whether it's from a storytelling angle, a filmmaking angle, just to see them back on the screen, man. And like you said, interacting with the villains and, shooting the shit, as I say, because that's essentially what they were doing. I think a lot of scenes were improvised, especially the climactic scene. So it was just an amazing time, to be alive and to be able to witness this come together. Because I want to say this, you probably won't believe me, and maybe you will because you're my friend, but I was the one years ago when I was talking with friends and they announced like Tom Holland is the new Spider-Man. I was saying to them, I remember hearing in the comic books that there's a multiverse, and it'd be sick as if they bring them all together, right? Like all the actors. And people would brush me off like it's not going to happen, whatever, like it's too much money, it's like it's just a lot of legalities and stuff. And I said, yeah, you're probably right, like because Hollywood at the end of the day, right, like it's just a lot of work and effort to bring everyone back together and make it cohesive. So just the idea that they executed on this notion that I had, just looking back, it's like, yeah, it's surreal, man. It's surreal.
Yeah, man. The way it's, and you know what, that this would have never happened
Yeah.
if it wasn't for everything that has transpired in like the last year between the relationship between Sony and Disney, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you remember when there was that moment in time where I think it was like after Infinity War Endgame, they were gonna take Spider-Man back, and there was all this
Yeah, I remember
controversy
that,
about them pulling Spider-Man out, and
yeah, I remember that actually.
then now after the fact, there's like speculation that was like a publicity stunt to like bring attention, right? But the other half of that coin is that there were like negotiations that weren't being met. Sony was trying to Marvel was trying to buy Spider-Man back. And this is around the time when they were reacquiring like the Netflix properties. They were reacquiring X-Men, Fantastic Four. and they wanted to get Spider-Man back, and Sony was not like allowing that. That's like their biggest IP, and they ended up coming to a deal where now it's like a cooperative sort of thing. And now with like the success of the MCU, and if it wasn't for the success of the MCU, I do not think this would have ever happened.
No,
because
no.
Sony wants money. They're
Yeah.
a fucking cash cow that has
Yeah,
one of the most.
that's their business model, right? Make as much money.
Know,
and Disney as well, right? Like they're no free-spirited, socially responsible kind of company. They also are looking for a profit.
and it seems like they found a solid middle that DC hasn't found between fan service and legitimate quality
storytelling. Yeah.
Storytelling and profit. So they're meeting
profit,
all these things, and like Warner Brothers is botching their movies in order to make some sort of money and keep it like as cookie cutter as possible.
Well, the vibe I get with like DC, Warner Brothers, whatever have you, is they're trying too hard. Like they're contriving these stories. Like I just saw the trailer for the next Batman. Like, yeah, that looks great. Probably gonna watch it, you know me. But it's like there's a part of me that it's like, is it really necessary to have another Batman? Like, why don't we wait it out a bit more? I'm sure Robert Pattinson's gonna do a great job, but
they're trying so hard to push through the Snyderverse stuff, man. They're just like they want to scrap that whole. Right. Yeah. They want to scrap that whole universe.
They want to wash the palette. Yeah, they want to move on from it for sure, because it was an era, right? It was a brief period where they were competing or attempted to compete with the MCU. The difference is with the MCU. Whether you have issues with it, whether you say it's a formulaic or paint by numbers, there's at least thought put into it in the sense that things are connecting. Like when I watch these movies, I actually like try to challenge them and say, wait, how is this possible? Okay, that's right. Because in that movie, they explained it and then they disclosed it. Kind of like what you were saying with Disney Plus, right? Like the What If series is canon. Yeah. And which we'll discuss. I don't want to keep jumping around, but that connects to.
But let me just touch on just that moment that you just for sure. To your point of wait a second, what was that thing that you just said?
With Disney, with like studios, being greedy with profit, and they're trying to like the DC was trying to compete with MCU, and MCU
moving on. It's gonna come back.
No worries. So I want to know, like, so the theater reaction, right, was hype. Aftermath, like, what did you do? I want to know, like, in the life of Sarria, like, what happened? Like, were you with your girl? Like, did you like dress up as Spiderman and say I gotta go kick some ass in an alleyway? Like, what happened?
so I went with my girl, and I was wearing this underneath something else.
I was hoping you would be rocking it.
Oh man, I was so close. It was too cold. It was too cold. I needed to have
no. Right, yeah.
But I had this thing and I zipped it down. But it was funny because when I got to the theater, we were like, doing the vaccination thing, whatever. And
nice.
then I was showing him my vaccination, and he sees the Spider-Man shirt, like that much of it showing.
Yeah.
And then I showed him, he's like, he looked at it. He's like, I got you, boy. He leaned in. He's like, I got you. And I'm like, you're damn right. And I unzipped right. But there was a few people that were dressed up in the theater, which was great. So I like that.
Oh yeah, because you saw it at midnight, right? First screen, pretty much.
I saw it at 7 p.m. the night before, so it wasn't super late. But
yeah, that's actually perfect.
Yeah, I cannot see a movie past 7 anymore.
You'll actually knock out, eh?
Man, I used to have so much pride in not doing that, or I'm just so exhausted that I'm not even taking it in at a certain point.
I believe you, man.
You know what I mean? So 7 o'clock's a perfect movie for me. Watched my perfect movie at the perfect time. I was enjoying it thoroughly all the way through. But my theater, man, I was so happy to be so enthusiastic. And typically I watch these movies in the city, and there's always an energy in the city, right? So watching this, my first Marvel movie outside of the city, I was nervous that it was going to be more low key, that it was going to be
subdue,
a little bit, but it wasn't, and I was happy. There was like dudes beside me that we were like like it felt like we knew the same things
Oh,
in
that's
terms of
amazing.
like
Yeah. Oh, so you
walking
had
into
like a little
the
bit
movie.
of a pre-talk
Like
like before the.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because the dude said, oh, he's like, fuck, I saw spoilers, and like we started talking, like we knew about like what was happening. So
Oh, I
so
always said it, man. If you were closer to me, I definitely would be going to the movies with someone like you, like to
oh
watch
man, you have to,
Spider-Man. I think we would
bro.
go there an hour early just to talk about everything.
100%. And like that's what
Yeah.
I want, man. I want to be with people in an environment that I can talk about it, because
Yeah.
it's like in this community of nerd, like
Yes. Of
it's when you
course.
find when you find the right ones and the people that share the same passion for like certain stories in that lore, it's a special thing, man. It's a bond. So, and I like to have those talks afterwards to like you were saying, challenge certain things and challenge certain things about these movies. And this is actually what I was wanting to touch on earlier when you said that you look back and you challenge certain elements of like, oh wait, how? And then, oh, they explained that. I was watching Far From Home
Right.
like hours before we went,
Yeah.
sorry,
Same. Of
hours before we went to the theater.
course.
And I was watching it and I was like, wait a second. I was like seeing plot holes for a second. And I was like, wait, how is Mysterio and his drones, if it's an illusion, actually creating real damage
Yeah.
if it's supposed to just be an illusion? And like
Yeah.
I was watching
Yeah.
half this movie and I was like really just like not getting past that.
Not invested.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
but then the moment that you see Mysterio turn like halfway through the movie, when he's like all of a sudden, big surprise, Mysterio's a bad guy.
Yeah. I know, right? Play the Spider-Man 2 video game, PS2.
Right, so he reveals that he was working with somebody from the first Iron Man movie who
Yeah.
was able to weaponize the drones in order to make the damage. So I was watching this movie, I'm like, wait, how are they making real damage if this is like
That's what
supposedly
tripped me out. That's what tripped me
illusion?
out too. Yeah.
But then he went on to explain that the drones were also weaponized in order to create the damage and to make it feel real.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was all
So
synchronized. Yeah.
so
It was
that
all
was one of those
synchronized in
moments
an
where I was
envelope.
like, wait, how does that? Oh, yeah,
Yeah, there's
that's
a lot of problems. Yeah, there's a lot of problems with that movie, and I'm sure we can pick it apart. And just it's funny that you bring that movie up, uh, because call it a sellout cop out, whatever the hell you want to call it. But after watching this film, it was such an impact and made me just like fall in love with the character all over again, like Spider-Man, and just the
it.
idea of
It
yeah,
it felt like it revitalized these franchises. Do you know how much love I'm seeing online for Andrew Garfield?
yeah,
And he
yeah,
was
amazing. But that's what I'm saying.
previously
But
the
that's what
most
I'm
shit on
saying.
one.
Yeah, of course, and that's why there was a lot of we'll talk about the Easter eggs, but like the whole thing about why they had those quips, like why they had those pieces of dialogue where he's like, would you, like Toby goes, would you stop, like work on the self-talk, like stop, you are amazing, it, whatever, right?
Yeah,
And he's like, thanks. He's like, that's meta, that's not the character talking, that's Andrew Garfield speaking like
exactly.
the actor who played Spider-Man. It was so cool, like it was working on so many different levels, and that was
Yeah,
exactly what you needed to do with this movie. Like it'd be stupid not to like take advantage or capitalize on those things, right?
exactly.
um
And by the way,
yeah,
before
go
we
ahead.
move from that particular moment,
Yeah.
that moment where they're having that conversation is the exact moment um, where Andrew Garfield's on the scaffolding. That was
Yeah,
the
I know.
image
Everything. Yeah.
that was the image that leaked, that everyone was like, oh, is it real? Is it fake? It was that exact moment. He's like hanging there. I'm like, that's the fucking
And you
screenshot
were
right
and you
there.
were backing it up too. Like you weren't skeptical or anything. Like you were like, no, that's real, man. I'm telling you. And you
Yeah.
even said it was Toby's hands in the frame, and I was like,
Yeah,
wow.
that was him. He was right there fucking telling him.
Well,
He's
how many
like,
movies have you watched where it's like things were you realize, oh, that was Photoshop, that was fake, that was whatever, and it
exactly.
was like, no, it's like everything that was leaked, even that shot of like like all three of them together, like standing and they're all
Oh,
like bleeding and stuff, like that was real. I thought that was a fake shot, like someone superimposed. The only reason why I thought
yeah.
wasn't fake is because if you look at that photo, Tobey Maguire looks significantly older and his
Yeah.
hair is different, so you could tell like it's real time. um but anyway, that's great to hear, man. Like I'm so happy like the expectations were met. Same with me as well. Superseded it, I think, for a lot of people is refreshing after like you were describing Far From Home. um I am a fan of the MCU. Like I think they did a marvelous job, no pun intended, with the whole like 22 films. But you know me, like I have my issues with them. Like I just feel it's formulaic, it's paint by numbers, and it could get tiresome. However, with this one, it did feel fresh, it did feel unique in its own way. I think part of it was because we had two characters that were outside of the universe. I think that, to be honest, was so refreshing. Like just hearing the line, you know, oh, were you in a band, the Avengers? It's like, no, that like, because we're so used to this, everything's connected, right? But I want to know, were there any parts for you that were kind of lackluster, didn't really hype you up, like we're kind of like, like, they were slow? What are your thoughts, man?
So there are a couple of specific parts.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with the biggest one.
Okay,
and
sure. I might agree on some. Let's see.
So I'm going to preface this by saying I understand in the context of how they presented these characters, why they made certain decisions, but I'm gonna back that with my expectations that I sort of had of this. And it was Toby's entrance, actually. And so the entrance of the Spider-Mans in general, I think could have been way more epic.
Yeah.
I think that it came at a good time. It was right after Aunt May's death, and like right when you're at the lowest part of the movie in terms of like emotion and like literally the hero, like what he's going through. He's at the lowest part, no hope. And then these heroes come in. I think that was a great time for them to come in. But I think that it was just kind of like an effort to keep Ned and MJ as in the movie as possible, to give Ned magic powers all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Like, and then
there's also a practical from a filmmaking perspective. I'll tell you something. There's also a practical reason why they did it. Again, I could be wrong, but this is just speculation. The amount of hype, right, around this movie, the possibility of it being leaked, right, as we've seen with just 2 images. Like, I don't even know how that's possible. Like, they must have been freaking out. They probably said to themselves, instead of shooting it on a soundstage or in some studio where there's going to be other spectators, we'll shoot it in a house, right, so it's confined and we can keep it secret. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Another testament, well, like another argument I would say, and I've heard a lot of reviewers say this, and it's something that, again, I, as a director, I pride myself on this, is a testament to the director, like, style. Not saying John Watts isn't a great director. Like, there's a lot of scenes in this movie I really enjoyed, more so than the other 2 films he's done. Like the whole spider sense when he figures out Goblin is like up to something. That was just beautiful. Like the way it was drawn out like that. Yeah, because he was in the room with him. But I love how it's like, because I thought he was gonna go to the next room and like say, Electro, what are you doing? But I love the revolving shot. Like, he followed him and you see in the background he's blurred out, and then he moves around and he's trying to figure out, and then he just like does the, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and then it's like he figures it out and he looks at him and he's like, why would you do it? Right. And he, like, because he can read, he doesn't read minds, he just senses him, like, he's evil, right?
And
anyway, hold on.
It added more. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to say this. I want to say I agree with you with the entrance, and you're right. Like, when I watched the audience reaction, I was watching before the podcast because I want to, like, just to bring me back to that moment of ecstasy, just euphoria, like just loving, just seeing these characters be on screen. They could have done it definitely more special. I think what would have been really cool is if Ned, because they still needed to bring them into the world, right? So you can't just have them like pop in. You have to establish that they're entered. So Ned and MJ could have been like trying it, but you just see the reaction on their face, like, okay, we tried. Oh, that doesn't work. Let's try it over here. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So you see the reaction.
They were already in the world.
They were okay. So they weren't brought into. Oh, okay.
No,
they were just like lingering around New York.
So they were in New York, and then they were able to access that, and then that's why when Andrew comes in, he goes,
perfect.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I've been here for a day. I have no idea. Like he full on says, and he kind of finds
you're right. So then, then having said that, you're right. Back to your point, they should have, like, more of an epic. Like, I get it. Some people could say like it's too. But that's cinema. Like, you need that moment. Like, it's emotion, right? Like, there's a reason.
Can I tell you my expectations for it?
Yeah, 100%. I think, yeah. Go ahead, and then I'll discuss mine.
Because this is in part like of my response to what kind of griped me about it. But when they dropped a couple of clips in promotion for this movie, they dropped this clip of an extended scene of Doc Ock and Spider-Man on the bridge. And you can hear in the background, like the score, you can hear a mix of like the Doc Ock's OG theme kind of remixed in, right? And hearing that, I was like, shit, they're bringing back the score, like they're making this feel proper. So I had imagined from that point on that the entrance of the individual Spider-Mans would be individual, and
Where they
that
would
they
have their
would
own
swing
themes.
in. They would swing in
Yeah.
on a remixed version of their
Yeah.
theme, which
Yeah.
is what I was wanting. I wanted to hear that fucking OG Danny Elfman score for you know what I mean? Like I wanted
Yeah.
some, and I had it in my mind that Spider-Man was going to be on his last, like kind of like when in Spider-Man 3, the OG, when Spider-Man's like by the neck with Venom getting slammed by the Sandman. He's about to like take his last punch, and then Harry comes as the new
Yeah,
Goblin
comes
and
in
then
and
saves
saves
him.
them. Yeah.
And that's what I kind of wanted. I wanted that moment for
Yeah.
Tom, and then
Yeah.
Andrew and a thing coming in with their spider sense, and like they felt like something was drawing them towards.
Or they just simply watched the news and
Statue
they
of
saw
Liberty.
this catastrophe and they're like, we're Spider-Man, we should go check it out. You
That's
know,
what
they
I
all meet up
wanted.
at the same time.
That's
The
what I
only
wanted.
reason, now that you're discussing this, like, great. Only reason why, in my opinion, I think it would have not worked, because it's tricky, right? It's a balance. The reason why they set them up at the house is because they were building up to the fight, so it allowed for that dialogue and those characters to like talk to each other instead of just being thrown into the fight. The only way it would work is if there was another action sequence that they still needed to do. You know what I mean?
And maybe they lost that first one because they
But
had
that's
that
what I'm saying.
conversation
Yeah,
about
because
like
there you
not
go.
knowing how
There
to
you go.
teamwork
See?
together.
I love this brainstorming. What it is
Oh.
that, yeah, they would lose and say, guys, I don't know about you, but I've never like fought on a team before, right? And then that's where they could do
that
like
whole
little clips
scene
and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a balance, right? Because I was even telling my dad, I'm like, I'm a crazy guy, right? So it's like I want more like, you know, them on the screen talking, shooting the shit, like, you know, just like being Spider-Man together. But like he was telling me, like it would have been a bit over the top, like fan service. Like at the end of the day, it is Tom Holland's movie, and they got to respect like people of the trilogy. But yeah, I 100% agree with you. Like from a filmmaking style, if you watch my content, like I'm all about that, right? Just how characters are introduced and things like that. It was like fun and like the Andrew Garfield one, I didn't mind. Like that was like for one, but then for
Yeah.
Toby, it was like, I don't know. Like this is the original. So this is the first time Spider-Man was ever on screen. Like the original.
He walked in all
Spider-Man, right?
confused, bro.
He walked in confused. He's like, "Oh, this closed," and I'm like, "And oh, hold on, I did." Okay, to give it some credit to the director, I read something somewhere where apparently they did it like his intentions, like how he saw it. The director is he wanted to like kind of introduce, like establish the characters as like humble, because that's what Spider-Man is. They're not like Iron Man. Like Iron Man always comes in like, you know, with the suit, like back in black, you know, like explosions in the background and stuff. And he's always like, yeah, you know, did the bill come? Yeah. but with Spider-Man, it's like he would show up. Like I kind of give it a pass because it's like it's Spider-Man, right? He's a dorky guy. He would show up like that. But what I'm saying is that the director, apparently his intention, what I read somewhere, could be wrong, but this is what I read. Andrew Garfield show up with the Spider-Man suit because the fan community, film community, whatever have you, collectively agree that he was the better
The best
Spider-Man, right? He was a better Spider-Man, right? Like the quippy, you know, smart ass kind of character, who had like a dark edge to him, right? That's what I admired about the Andrew Garfield version. But Peter Parker, right? They believe was more the Tobey Maguire, right? The innocent, big-hearted, wide-eyed, like doesn't, you know, when he puts on the suit, you feel like he's heroic, right? He's more of a mature version of Spider-Man, right? So that's why I'll give it a pass. Like it's forgiving that way. But nevertheless, man, like I don't know. I just seeing them come back. I think for me, like I didn't really care how they were introduced. The fact that they just brought him back.
Yeah, it was epic regardless.
Yeah,
and
no,
I
I'm
think,
saying like, yeah, they could have easily like not had them and say some bullshit like, oh, we're only able to get the villains and like it's Tom Holland's movie. I don't know, like something crazy.
I was gonna say that. Well, I'll get to this point, but with Toby, it was gonna be epic regardless. But I think part of my expectation of where I felt that energy was gonna come from, I thought they were gonna de-age because they took these villains from those moments in those movies that I think I kind of just assumed that Spider-Man would be pulled from also that time, but instead they were.
Yeah, they manipulated their faces, right?
Well,
VFX.
no. So what I was hoping was that it was going to be the iterations of them at that time, because that's when the villains were pulled. They were pulled from the moments just before they died in the original movies they were in. So I thought that the Spider-Men were also going to come in from that same time.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? But the villains were
Gotcha.
from that time, and then the
No, you're
Spider-Men
right.
were
I
like
think I know,
present
and
day.
that's something that I wanted to discuss with you. We'll get into that now that we established like the one thing I wanted to mention though before I move on is, in my opinion, I enjoyed the characters being on screen together and the villains and things like that. But the set piece, like the climactic battle, I think could have been much better. I didn't like it at the Statue of Liberty. It looked ugly, like the VFX. And was that just me? Like
Yeah, no,
the scaffold, like I don't know.
it felt very basic
It didn't
set,
seem stylistic. Yeah, like it was
right?
very dark and like I couldn't really see the
Like,
characters.
yeah, it was a little, it was anticlimactic of a location.
Mhm.
But my honestly, to have Andrew and Toby in this movie isn't even the best part of this movie. It's like the final hurrah of the movie, but like the way the
Yeah,
villains interact, to your point, man,
yeah,
was incredible. Like the way that they brought the energy back to those characters, the way uh, they kind of remixed them, like right after the bridge fight when Doc Ock absorbs Peter's nanotech, and he's like fully aware that he's like, oh,
yeah.
nanotech, like he knows what it is, right? And then Tom's able to actually control him because his suit's able to detect that the nano is like integrated into something else. I saw
Yeah, that was very
I
clever. I like that.
right,
As a
and
way of
like,
restraining him, right? Yeah.
yeah, and each of the villains, after they were caught by Spider-Man, after Doctor Strange gives him that thing to capture them,
Gadget. Yeah. Yeah.
like they all, even though they're from different universes, like they all know each other. Like Electro knew Dr. Connors and he knew that he was existing, but then they already established as well that like these universes don't have certain things that other universes have. So like um Tom didn't have Oscorp, right?
Yeah.
His timeline doesn't have Oscorp yet anyway.
Yeah.
The other Spider-Man didn't have the Avengers, right? And like there are like some key differences,
They also
right?
didn't have magic, which is what I love. Like that throwaway line when he's like, magic, what, like Doc Ock is
Yeah,
like, magic, what is this, a birthday party? Because people forget when you watch the superhero movies of the past, like they didn't have this huge MCU like integrate all these different storylines together, right? It was just a simple story. So really, really cool to see that throwaway line
yeah.
from Doc Ock himself. But
Who's your favorite villain? I want to just interject
yeah, yeah, for
before we
sure.
get into anything
Well, we're
else while
getting
we're
into
talking
like
about him.
no, for sure. We're getting into like now Easter eggs and moments that stood out. So basically, like, yeah, 100% with regards to the villains interacting. My favorite villain, very, very interesting that you asked because I've never thought about it. I think it's a combination of Doc Ock, probably more so Doc Ock. Like I just enjoy the whole design of him. Also him
Mm.
as a character. Flint Marco is not bad. I enjoyed like his backstory, just how he's such an honest character. Like he's not a villain, right? He's just a man with bad luck, as he says
Yeah.
in the movie.
What did you think of Goblin, man?
Yeah, Goblin killed it. Willem Dafoe, credit to that.
I think he one upped his performance.
He did. He did. They said apparently they
He's
said like he did even more, like because they had so many takes and like raw footage. Like I was just reading stuff. Like he really like sold. Like they just had to use. They could only use so much, right? But apparently he went all in for this performance. Um, yeah, he killed it. Like it's no surprise to me, right? It brought me back to like the first movie and just the spirit of the character, the bringing back that energy. And it was so fitting, like he would be the one to kind of thwart Tom
yeah.
Holland's plan, right? Because he is, I don't know if they know or some people don't realize, he's the arch nemesis. He's considered like the Joker to like Spider-Man, right? So
Wait, just before you continue there,
yes,
you're
yeah.
talking about the Joker. How reminiscent is that scene when Peter's punching him in the face and he's just laughing?
Yeah,
That's
100%.
that's
Yeah.
straight out of The Dark Knight,
Yeah,
man.
and they definitely took it from there, right? Obviously, it wasn't the same scene, right? In the
Obviously
context,
not, but just like the punching and the
but the punch and
laughing.
those punches were visceral, man. Like I was watching them, like damn, and I felt that, right? And that, again, another moment where we're just jumping into these moments that we love. that climactic scene where he's punching the shit out of Goblin, and Tobey Maguire looks at Garfield and they both nod their head, right? Because this is what I was saying from the predictions, or I don't know if I mentioned it, or I always been talking about with friends, is because they're older, right? You should have that like older brother, like, guidance. And the way they looked at each other and how he jumps in and he stops him with the glider, he matured, right? He's the oldest Spider-Man out of all of them, right? He's been doing it for a long time. And Tom Holland is juvenile, right? He's uh, still growing. He's still maturing to become Spider-Man. This is why a lot of people argue on the internet. This is why I think I had like a shopping spree and I just bought all the Spider-Man movies, because I started to see, maybe wanted to see, the whole story realized overall is that Tom Holland was never supposed to come across as like the one and only Spider-Man, like the true Spider-Man. He was supposed to come across as someone that was becoming Spider-Man, if that makes sense. So that's why in the movies he does things that aren't reminiscent of Spider-Man, or that's why people in the comic book community say that's not what Spider-Man would do. It's like, you're right, it's not. But I think that maturity, as displayed in the ending of this movie, showcased him coming together, him like those values coming to fruition. Which I'll discuss my next moment that I absolutely love. This is what I think sealed it for me, because me, I'm a fan of visual storytelling as much as I love my dialogue. When you can convey it visually, it's beautiful, right? When he comes back to the shop, as we know in the movie, he has to, one of the drawbacks of sealing the universe, right, from more kind of villains or other Spider-Man coming into their universe, he had to basically have his friends forget about him, or anyone that he ever existed, right, that knew him, forget who he was, and he would have to start fresh by helping them remember. And he goes at the end of the movie and he tries his best. He goes to the bakery shop, and I love how he starts off. He's like, he has cue cards. He's ready to like, convince them like, I'm your friend. And I'll be honest, man, like I didn't know how they were gonna take it, like what direction, because again, Disney, and like we need them to be friends. I don't know, right? And I thought it was gonna be one of those things where like he's gonna try and tell them, and because Zendaya, like her character MJ, she's very one note. She's very like dry, cutthroat. So I imagine something like, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. Like, could you leave now? You're making me uncomfortable. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and then he would be leaving brokenhearted, right? But they took it one step further. They took it to another level. They took it to a level of who Peter Parker is and the emotional weight. And they're talking, and he sees the Band-Aid on the forehead, and he goes, "Oh, like how'd you get that?" And he's like, "Oh, I just got hurt, whatever." And she's like, "It still hurts sometimes, but it's getting better." And he nods his head and he puts the cue cards away, and he's like, and he looks at his friend and he realizes, Raimi trilogy. No matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, it's the ones I love who will always be the ones who pay. And just like saying those words like choke me up, because going back to the roots of the characters, that's Spider-Man. That's why Spider-Man is so loved by everybody. It's not because he's stylistic and flashy with the colors and amazing powers. Yeah, of course we all want to like swing, and we all make that sound every chance we get. But it's because he's he's a self-sacrificing guy that it's not fantastic to be Spider-Man if you think about it. Everyone who's around him, everyone who he associates with, will be in harm's way, like his Aunt May. And he has to make that ultimate decision, the mature decision, which is why, again, I love these movies, and why I think back to your notion of they're doing like 3 separate trilogies of like teenager, 20s, and then like in his 30s, whatever. That would make so much sense in retrospect when they make those movies down the road. It's looking back, it's like how much he's grown, right? He was a kid, right? He was a kid when
Can I interject as well?
Yeah, 100%. I'll let you. I know I'm going on a rant here, but please.
No,
sorry.
no worries. No, of course. Well, that's the passion, man. But this is what people are saying about this trilogy, the one that just capped off now, that people are calling this the perfect Spider-Man trilogy. And I'll tell you why they're saying that. Okay. And I'll tell you why. Something that was sort of deciphered in the first movies of each of the previous ones was him developing his powers. Well, his origin, developing his powers, becoming Spider-Man by the end of the first movie. Right. What people are viewing this trilogy as is his journey to becoming Spider-Man. In the first one, I had seen this thing on Instagram, and it basically had each of the 3 of this trilogy, and what they represented to his growth. And the first one, it said, was just a kid who wanted to be an Avenger in the
Right.
first one, in Homecoming. The second one was described as him owning the power that he has and becoming the hero.
Right.
And this movie was fully realizing himself as that hero and putting everybody before himself, and then making that ultimate sacrifice at the end, similar to Tony, right?
Right.
So there's this arc across 3 movies of him becoming Spider-Man that I think, and to touch on sort of what you were talking about before, how like he was kind of making decisions that like Spider-Man wouldn't make yet, right? Because there was still that growth that I think was necessary for the character, which watching these Tom movies over with that context makes me enjoy it a little bit more, because you're leaving each of the other Spider-Mans with like the full-on understanding that they know who they are as Spider-Man after the first one. The second and third or whatever followed was like basically just another adventure, but while he has his full self sort of intact. But this was more of like a growth process over multiple movies. And this is the one that made me appreciate Tom. It made me Team Tom. Basically, this movie, his depth, the way that he portrayed the character, the decisions they made with killing off Aunt May instead of Uncle Ben. You know, they're releasing Spider-Man freshman year or something on
Oh, you heard that? I was gonna bring
on
that
Disney
up with you.
Plus. Yeah,
That's amazing, man.
and it's a prequel. So I wonder
Yeah.
if they're gonna touch on
Well, that's when he gets his
Uncle
powers
Ben
and like
and like around that
well,
time.
I
Right?
think
'Cause-
they will. They have
yeah,
you can't ignore it. And because when we see Spider-Man like Tom Holland version, we get right into it. Like he already has the powers,
Yeah.
and Iron Man's trying to teach him how to like control them
yeah.
and harness
And I
them,
kind of
whatever, right?
assumed that he already had that great power comes great responsibility talk, because I just thought they didn't want to do the Uncle Ben thing again. So I
Same
thought
here.
they just
Yeah.
jumped in. But then to know that when Aunt May dies, she delivers those words makes me think, what happened to Uncle Ben? Did he just
No,
cut?
it's true. No, because I think, in my opinion, like they'll probably touch on it more in the streaming service, like the streaming series. But what I'm saying is, I think that was the whole look. Just thinking about it, it's whether it was intentional or not, it's genius if you think about it. This whole like idea of the multiverse, because they're able to retcon a lot of things that were supposed to be done but weren't done on their part out of trying new things, maybe laziness, whatever have you. And what I'm getting at is, one could argue like in this universe, the Tom Holland universe, Ben Parker is just a guy. Like he doesn't really have that much of a say in Peter's life, and like Peter just got bit by a spider, and like Iron Man was the mentor to him, because that's how it's conveyed, which is not bad. That's his universe, right? That's what you could argue. I think a lot of pushback, a lot of people say like High Top Films, what we watch, is you made a very good point. It's fine Iron Man being a mentor, but it's not fine that he has so much about influence over Peter Parker, because that takes away the, again, essence of the character, the ethos of this character, Peter Parker.
The individuality, man.
The individuality, but the idea is that it's not even that. It's just like, think about it, right? Peter Parker, the reason why so many kids look up to him, so many kids want to be him, is he comes from middle class family, like humble family, that are just running on good values. You know what I mean? Like core values that shape who Peter Parker is. Iron Man has good values, but he's also a billionaire playboy narcissist, right? So it's kind of like, if Peter Parker's relying on this man to be a mentor, how does that feed into the idea of Peter Parker, Spider-Man, being this friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, right? He's bigger than life, and that's not who Spider-Man is, right? Now, this is where art kind of clashes with culture and says like, well, who are we to decide who Spider-Man is, right? Like Spider-Man could be anything we want as long as it's a cohesive interpretation. But I think that's the important thing, man, is that, like what you were saying, is looking at Tom Holland, looking at the trilogy, and this is why, again, I ended up buying all that. Bro, think the home videos, man, are going crazy. Like I bought a steelbook limited edition. I ended up finding Far From Home because I collect, right?
Yeah.
And it just like, I'm a completist, so it's like it makes sense to get that. Only like 14 available. I had to order it from like a US Amazon. Gone. Now they're going for like $80, $100. Like I only got mine for 40, but like it's going to go up from there, because everyone's going to have the same attitude I am. They're going to watch it and say, fuck it, I'm going to buy all the movies and like, know
Well,
that I
bro,
have like the collection.
the moment they start advertising this movie with Toby and Andrew in it, the
Oh yeah,
prices are gonna go
100%,
up,
bro.
bro.
It's
The
already on
moment they do
Wikipedia and
that,
IMDb. Yeah, it's like
100%.
they're ready to go. But what I'm saying
Have,
is like, but this is what I mean by like it's genius is that it's not like they brought him back as like a cameo, like just like, oh hey, it's the older guys, or like, you know what I mean, like it's the other people that are Spider-Man. They did it in a way that was believable, like plausible. Like they did it in a way where if you watch all the Spider-Man films, it would make sense. Like as you're watching it, your brain's saying like these moments are happening in another timeline. I don't want to get into science or anything like this. I could be completely wrong again about this, but I believe Einstein even touched on that in his studies because he's considered, one of the smartest men that ever lived. That there are such a things as like parallel universes and dimensions and things like that. Did you hear about something like that, or am I completely off?
no, yeah, he did something. He said something about that, and I think how like I don't know if he's the one who said that like time is like a loop in some
It's
way,
not
but like
linear. Yeah,
things,
it's all over
yeah.
the like it's yeah. So that's what I'm saying is like that. Then it goes on to another you know level of reality where it's like you watch it and you're like, well, this isn't just magic. Like this could be possible too. You know what I mean? Another universe. Sorry, it could be black.
And have hair.
And have it. No. You got hair, bro.
Yo, so yeah, so let's I have
So
a
let's go back. Okay,
breakdown
yeah, let's get into now
because
Easter eggs.
yeah, let's do that. But yeah,
Okay,
let's do
yeah, yeah.
that.
Okay, wait.
Because
So hold on, sorry. I just want to say before we continue, the moment I also appreciated, which you also touched on, was Aunt May. And I want to just say this is that weren't you saying in your head when she got up, right? You know how like she got up and she was bouncing around, like, oh, why, like my back, like I'm okay, I'm okay. Were you
yeah.
kind of like a little bit disgruntled, like, are you kidding? Like you're not gonna kill her off?
Well, yeah.
As dark as that sounds, like think about what I'm saying, like
No,
from a
like
storytelling
I
perspective, right?
100%. I like
Yeah.
how they executed that though, because they kind of like made you think like, oh wait, but that actually happens also. Like people like when they are like
They're in
impaled or
shock.
something, their
Yeah,
body
yeah.
like that is adrenaline and like it's
Yeah,
like
you're right.
their
You're right. And
body
then
like
their
going
body
into this
feels it. Yeah.
emergency state, and then it slowly settles in. I like how they did that. I can tell that it
Yeah.
was improvised and it didn't feel scripted. Like you felt the pain of Peter, and you felt. I didn't feel like like sometimes I watch deaths on screen and I'm like, that's fucking cheesy. Like
Yeah.
this felt like organic and it felt real, and I thought it was crazy, man. Like the goblin coming through, betraying, and like just coming through as like the main villain of the movie, being the one to like rattle everybody up. You know what I mean? Like we don't need to be fixed. We're like, and we're not going home because we're gonna die. Like they're like the stakes in this movie were just incredible, and you felt it from the villains that it wasn't like some lousy sort of motivation. It was like they're gonna die
It was a
if the
proper
Spider-Man,
motivation. Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
you feel the stakes, you feel the weight of everyone's decisions, and it's to survive,
But
right? It's
also
not,
it's but and yeah, back to your point, it's like not only are they going home, but it's easy for Spider-Man to say, like, you go home and live your life, so I can live mine. It's like, yeah, but when you go home, like you live in glory. We don't live in glory, right?
yeah,
We're either murdered or ridiculed. So
yeah.
it's like their motivation is to like stay in that universe, but also retain their powers. Because when they associate their powers with their
Their
identity,
strength,
their
exactly.
strength, right? But their identity really, right? Like that's why Electro is like, I'm going to be back to going to nobody. Which brings me to my next Easter egg, which is something we predicted, I think, or I mentioned quite many times to you, is that they had to throw some black Puerto Rican kid, or at least throwaway line, because Miles Morales, boys. I watched a theater reaction to that, and it was amazing. Like from people watching it in New Jersey,
Yeah,
and he goes, yeah, and he says the line, and I'm like, I knew it, because again, when you're in the film community, like, you just know what's like things that need to be done. And he
yeah.
goes to him, he goes, I was hoping you were black. You know what I mean? And he's like,
Oh,
sorry.
there's got to be a black
Yeah,
Spider-Man.
he's like, it's okay. There's gotta be a black person. And I swear, in that theater, like that video reaction I watched, everyone was like, yeah, there is.
Oh, you know it.
Everyone was
Oh,
like, yeah,
you know
yeah, yeah.
it.
They were just like fucking going crazy. And I was just like dying.
That's
I'm like,
hilarious.
and that's what they're doing, man. That's the next step for Sony, right?
That's Easter eggs, man.
Easter eggs, man. Even what's
Daredevil,
another
bro.
Easter egg? Like,
Daredevil. Charlie
sorry, was
Cox.
that you cut out? Charlie Cox. Who's that?
Daredevil, bro.
Oh, right. That's right. Yeah, when
Bro,
Daredevil came out. So I didn't watch the show, and I should, but when he came on the
what?
screen, I knew who he was, like from pop culture. And everybody like clapped in my
Oh,
theater, bro.
Bro, I knew for sure he was going to show up the day before because they dropped the most recent episode of Hawkeye
Oh,
and they
okay.
revealed Kingpin as the main
Yeah,
bad guy.
yeah.
So as
Oh,
soon as
so
I seen that, I was
so
like, Daredevil
is
showing up
Kingpin
tomorrow.
from
He
like
was the
that
main
actor?
bad guy
He's yeah,
from the Netflix.
but I'm saying he's in Daredevil. Yeah, because that's Daredevil's like arch nemesis, right?
Yeah, Kingpin. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is amazing. I think what's next, like just because we're on the subject of like, having all these characters thrown in, is Deadpool. And I know that's already been announced, but I just want to see how that works. And
They've already announced what movie he's coming in.
Deadpool 3, isn't he making that or no?
He is, but he's making an appearance in Doctor Strange 2 initially.
That's right. Yeah. That's gonna be
But
wild, man.
they're saying he's gonna be dropping. They're gonna be dropping him in almost all of the movies as like a cameo.
Oh, that's sick. Like he just like does a wink to the audience kind of thing.
Yeah, like he's just
Like a
like that
Stan Lee.
fourth wall. Yeah,
Like a
yeah.
Stan Lee. Yeah, yeah. That's dope.
So that's
Just make it, yeah, just make it plausible. Don't make it random.
Because he actually just confirmed that he just signed one of the biggest Marvel contracts ever given to an actor.
Yeah, I believe it, man. He's a huge property, man.
In terms of movie count, and this is why they're saying like throw him into multiple projects, just like the cameo.
If you think about it, man, Ryan Reynolds. Yeah, like Ryan Reynolds, like it's almost like Iron Man, right? They realize like the actor
is the character
is bigger than the character, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you need, as long as he's alive, like get him in as much as you can because he's a huge property. On that note, man, like I just want to say there's a lot still to be made, still to be created with these films. And Spider-Man No Way Home, just it felt like as much as it was part of the MCU, it felt like it was on its own. It felt like our movie, like if you're a Spider-Man fan, if you're a fan of the character,
yeah,
it didn't feel like it was part of this. It is part of the bigger universe. You got Doctor Strange, but it really did feel for the first time in a while that it just wasn't part of anything bigger. It was like Doctor Strange was just there as a
Spider-Man story.
Yeah, Spider-Man. Doctor Strange was there as a plot device, and then everything else just that transpired was a consequence of it. So
yeah,
I'm really happy that you came onto the podcast. Really happy that you're rocking the suit. I'm so happy that it met your expectations. So happy we can have this conversation, and we didn't, have the film spoiled for us because I know how pissed we would have been. I know you had like a minor spoiler, but that was nothing compared to what we saw. And yeah, guys, if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it. Spider-Man No Way Home. It's quite a ride.